Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for new stories. The Zorvith ship loomed over the barren horizon of Cake 23, its vast metallic shell a blot on the pale lavender sky. Inside the research station, Dr. Elena Reyes scanned her monitors, frowning at the faint energy readings spiking to dangerous levels. Another power surge, she muttered, brushing a lock of dark hair from her face. Tell me the solar flares are to blame. Her assistant, Malcolm Haynes, glanced at her with a grim expression. Not solar flares. The pattern is deliberate. Something's here. The station's AI chimed in with a cold, clinical tone. Unidentified vessel detected. High probability of extraterrestrial origin. Before anyone could react, the station's lights flickered, and a low hum reverberated through the walls. Moments later, the ceiling split open, revealing several hovering Zorvith drones. Each was sleek and organic, resembling metallic insects with glowing blue cores. Panic erupted. Reyes grabbed Malcolm's arm, pulling him toward the emergency lockdown chamber. Move. We need to. A pulse of energy surged from one of the drones, freezing her in place. The last thing she saw before everything went black was Malcolm being dragged away, screaming. Elena woke to sterile white light and an unyielding surface beneath her. She tried to move but found her wrists bound by cold metal restraints. Surrounding her were others from the colony, their faces pale with fear. Dr. Reyes, Malcolm's voice called from nearby, shaky but alive. We're in one of their ships. They took us. Her eyes adjusted, revealing the alien forms before her. The Zorvith were tall, with translucent skin that shimmered like liquid crystal. Their elongated heads bore black, expressionless eyes, and their slender limbs moved with eerie precision. One of them stepped forward, its voice resonating in her mind rather than her ears. Humans, your genetic material is sufficient for our purposes. You will contribute to the survival of the Zorvith species. Elena's jaw clenched. You can't just take what you want, she spat. The Zorvith tilted its head. You are insignificant compared to the continuation of our kind. Your suffering is irrelevant. Her mind raced as the Zorvith began their process, strange machinery descending from the ceiling. Pain unlike anything she'd ever felt coursed through her body. Yet even through the agony she glared at her captors, her spirit unbroken. You don't understand humans at all, she growled, her voice laced with defiance. We're not so easy to break. In the corner of the chamber, Cawthon observed silently. Something about the humans' reaction unsettled him, a spark of resistance he couldn't comprehend. He had always believed in the necessity of their methods. But now, watching this frail creature fight against insurmountable odds, he felt the first stirrings of doubt. And so, the seeds of rebellion were sown, both within the humans and among the Zorvith themselves. Elena Reyes sat slumped against the cold wall of the holding cell, her body trembling from the aftershocks of the Zorvith's invasive procedure. Around her, the other captives huddled in silence, the atmosphere thick with despair. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms as she glared at the faint glow of the force field sealing their prison. Malcolm Haynes crouched beside her, his voice low. Elena, they're going to keep doing this. If we don't find a way out? His voice trailed off, but his meaning was clear. Elena exhaled sharply. We'll find a way. We have to. The faint hum of Zorvith footsteps echoed down the metallic corridor. The aliens' movements were unervingly graceful, their translucent forms shimmering in the dim light. Cawthon entered the chamber, his expression unreadable. You resist despite overwhelming odds, he said, addressing Elena directly. What? Your pain is unnecessary. Cooperation would spare you further suffering. Elena's lips curled into a bitter smile. You think this is about pain? You don't get it. Humans don't just roll over when we're threatened. We fight. We survive. Cawthon tilted his head, studying her as if she were a puzzle he couldn't solve. Your resilience is inefficient. It serves no purpose? Wrong, Elena shot back. It's what makes us human. And it's why you'll never break us. Cawthon remained silent, his dark eyes reflecting a flicker of something, curiosity perhaps, or doubt. He turned and left without another word. Later, when the Zorvith handlers escorted them to another chamber, Elena took note of every detail. The layout of the corridors, the placement of surveillance devices, the timing of the drone's patrols. Every piece of information could be a potential advantage. The chamber was lined with glowing vats filled with what appeared to be embryonic forms, half-formed creatures, their features a grotesque blend of Zorvith and human traits. Malcolm shuddered beside her. They're growing hybrids, he whispered. Using us like lab rats? Elena's stomach churned, but she forced herself to stay focused. The Zorvith operated with chilling efficiency, their gestures precise as they manipulated the machinery. Cathuan stood apart from the others, observing the humans with an intensity that made Elena uneasy. As the Zorvith prepared to subject them to another round of procedures, a faint vibration underfoot caught Elena's attention. She recognized it as a power fluctuation, a momentary disruption in the ship's systems. It was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. "Malcolm," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "When I give the signal, be ready to move." "What signal?" he hissed, panic creeping into his voice. "You'll know," she said, her gaze fixed on the control panel across the room. The Zorvith began their procedure, their cold hands guiding Elena toward the machinery. As they activated the device, she let out a scream, not from pain but from sheer defiance. The sound startled the handlers, their movements faltering for a split second. In that moment, the ship trembled again, the power fluctuation intensifying. Elena seized the opportunity, twisting free of her captor's grip and lunging toward the control panel. Her fingers flew across the unfamiliar interface, her instincts guiding her as she triggered a cascade of errors in the system. Alarms blared and the room descended into chaos. The force field around the other captives flickered, then collapsed. "Now?" Elena shouted. Malcolm and the others sprang into action, overwhelming the startled Zorvith with sheer numbers. Though the humans were outmatched physically, their determination gave them an edge. They wrestled weapons from the handlers, turning the alien technology against its creators. Cathuan watched the scene unfold, his expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed as though he might intervene. But instead, he stood motionless, his gaze fixed on Elena. The humans fought their way through the corridors, using the stolen weapons to disable drones and breach security barriers. Elena led the charge, her mind racing with plans and contingencies. "We need to find a way to contact Earth," she said, ducking behind a corner as a patrol drone whirred past. Malcolm nodded, clutching a makeshift weapon. "The ship's comm system is probably locked down. We'll need to hack into it." Elena glanced around, her eyes landing on a small access terminal embedded in the wall. She quickly approached it, her fingers trembling as she worked to bypass the Zorvith encryption. As she worked, Cathuan appeared at the end of the corridor, flanked by 2 drones. The humans tensed, ready for a fight. But Cathuan raised a hand, signaling the drones to stand down. "I could have stopped you," he said, his voice resonating in their minds. "But I did not. Do you wonder why?" Elena narrowed her eyes. "If you're looking for gratitude, you won't find it here." Cathuan's gaze softened, an almost imperceptible shift, but one that spoke volumes. "Your defiance intrigues me. Your species intrigues me. Perhaps there is value in understanding you rather than destroying you." Elena hesitated, her instincts warning her not to trust him. But she also recognized an opportunity. "If you really want to understand us," she said, "then help us. Let us go." Cathuan tilted his head as if considering her words. "I cannot free you. But I can provide assistance." Before Elena could respond, the ship shuddered violently, throwing everyone off balance. The Zorvith alarms blared louder, their voices echoing through the corridors. Cathuan's expression darkened. "We are under attack. Another human vessel has arrived." Elena's heart leapt at the news. Earth had received their distress signal. Help was on the way. But Cathuan's next words sent a chill down her spine. "If your kind destroys this ship, you will perish along with us." The tension in the corridor was palpable as Cathuan met Elena's gaze, his alien eyes reflecting an unspoken challenge. "Decide quickly, human. Your survival depends on it." The Zorvith ship rocked violently as explosions echoed through its corridors. The humans crouched in tense silence, gripping their stolen weapons as debris rained from the ceiling. Elena Reyes stood at the access terminal, her fingers hovering over the alien controls. Her heart raced as she processed Cathuan's words. Earth's fleet was attacking, and though it meant hope, it also meant danger. If they couldn't find a way off the ship or disable the Zorvith systems, they'd all be caught in the crossfire. Cathuan loomed nearby, his crystalline skin shimmering in the dim, flickering light. "Your vessels are relentless," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "They will annihilate this ship unless we act." Elena spun to face him, her tone sharp. "You mean unless I act? Don't pretend this is altruism. You're just trying to save your own kind." Cathuan inclined his head slightly. "Self-preservation is a universal instinct, is it not? However, I believe our survival is now intertwined." Malcolm Haynes, standing guard beside Elena, scoffed. "You expect us to trust you? After everything you've done?" Cathuan's dark eyes locked onto Malcolm's. Trust is irrelevant. Mutual necessity is what binds us now. I have knowledge you do not. Without it you will fail. Elena bit back a retort. She didn't trust Cawthon, but she couldn't ignore the kernel of truth in his words. Time was running out, and Earth's forces wouldn't differentiate between captives and captors in their assault. Fine, she said finally, turning back to the terminal. But if you betray us, I'll make sure you regret it. The group moved cautiously through the labyrinthine corridors, guided by Cawthon. The alien seemed unperturbed by the carnage around them, drones sparking, Zorvath bodies crumpled in heaps. His focus remained on the task ahead. What exactly are we looking for? Malcolm asked, his voice taut. The ship's central core, Cawthon replied. It houses our primary systems. From there, you may be able to override the containment protocols and disable the hybridization machinery. Elena frowned. What about the comms? We need to contact Earth and tell them we're on board. Cawthon hesitated for the briefest moment. The core controls all ship functions including communications. If you succeed, you will have what you need. They rounded a corner, only to find their path blocked by a squad of Zorvath soldiers. The translucent beings moved with eerie precision, their weapons aimed squarely at the group. Stay back. Malcolm shouted, raising his stolen blaster. Before anyone could fire, Cawthon stepped forward, his form shimmering as he projected a wave of energy. The Zorvath soldiers faltered, their weapons lowering. What's he doing? Malcolm whispered, his grip tightening on his weapon. Elena's eyes narrowed as she observed Cawthon. I think he's ordering them to stand down. Cawthon turned to them, his expression unreadable. Not all of my kind agree with our methods. There are those who would see an alternative path. One of the Zorvath soldiers stepped forward, its voice resonating in their minds. You align yourself with the humans, Cawthon. Why? Cawthon's response was firm. Because they endure what we cannot. And their survival may be the key to ours. The soldier hesitated, then lowered its weapon and gestured for the others to do the same. Elena didn't trust the sudden shift, but she couldn't afford to question it. Let's keep moving, she said, motioning for the group to follow. As they approached the central core, the air grew hotter, and the hum of the ship's systems became a deafening roar. The core chamber was massive, a cavernous space dominated by a pulsating energy sphere suspended in the center. This is it, Cawthon said, gesturing to a console near the edge of the platform. The core's interface. It will allow you to disrupt the hybridization process and access the comms. Elena rushed to the console, her mind racing as she deciphered the alien controls. The language was unfamiliar, but patterns and logic began to emerge as she worked. Malcolm, she called over her shoulder, keep an eye on the perimeter. If any drones show up, we'll need cover. Malcolm nodded, positioning himself with the other captives. Cawthon stepped closer to Elena, his voice low. Be cautious. The core is volatile. A mistake could destroy this vessel. Elena shot him a glare. Don't distract me then. Her fingers flew over the controls, bypassing layers of encryption. The core's energy pulsed erratically, and she felt a bead of sweat trickle down her temple. Suddenly, the console emitted a sharp, grating noise, and the chamber shook violently. What's happening? Malcolm shouted, his eyes darting to the glowing sphere. Cawthon's tone was grim. The core is destabilizing. You must act quickly. Elena gritted her teeth, her focus narrowing to the task at hand. She found the command sequence for the hybridization systems and initiated a shutdown. The glowing vats throughout the ship began to dim, their contents dissolving into harmless vapor. It's working? Malcolm yelled, a rare note of hope in his voice. Elena barely had time to savor the victory before a new alert blared across the console. The comms system was within reach, but the core's instability was escalating. You have a choice, Cawthon said, his voice steady despite the chaos. Prioritize the comms or stabilize the core. You cannot do both. Elena's mind raced. If she stabilized the core, they'd have more time to escape, but without contacting Earth, the attack fleet might destroy them anyway. If she prioritized the comms, the ship could explode before they could escape. Damn it, she muttered, her fingers hovering over the controls. Taking a deep breath, she made her decision. The next few moments were a blur. Elena's hands moved with practiced precision as she sent a distress signal to Earth, transmitting their location and status. Signal sent, she said, her voice tight. Now let's get the hell out of here. Cawthon gestured toward a maintenance hatch on the far side of the chamber. This way. It leads to the escape pods. The group sprinted toward the hatch, the ship shaking violently as the core's instability worsened. Drones swarmed into the chamber, but the Zorvath soldiers who had joined their cause held them off, buying the humans precious time. As they climbed into the escape pods, Elena turned to Cawthon. "Are you coming with us?" Cawthon hesitated, then shook his head. "My place is here. I must ensure my people survive this day." Elena wanted to argue, but there was no time. The pod's hatch sealed shut, and moments later, they were hurtling away from the doomed ship. Through the viewport, Elena watched as Earth's fleet closed in, their weapons blazing. The Zorvath vessel erupted in a blinding explosion, its debris scattering into the void. Elena slumped back in her seat, exhaustion washing over her. They had survived, but the battle was far from over. Somewhere out there, Cawthon had made his choice, and she had a feeling their paths would cross again. The escape pod rocked as it entered the upper atmosphere of a nearby moon, its descent rough but controlled by the automated systems. Inside, the survivors huddled together, their faces drawn and pale. Elena sat in the pilot's seat, monitoring the pod's trajectory. Beside her, Malcolm watched the viewport, his eyes scanning the horizon for signs of pursuit. The explosion of the Zorvath ship had sent a shockwave through the stars, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that their escape had been too easy. The Zorvath didn't strike her as a species that gave up so easily. "Do you think the fleet got the message?" Malcolm asked, breaking the silence. "They must have," Elena replied, though uncertainty gnawed at her. "The signal went through just before we launched. Earth knows what happened up there. Let's hope they're ready for whatever comes next," Malcolm said grimly. The pod touched down with a heavy thud, its retro thrusters kicking up clouds of alien dust. The hatch hissed open, revealing a barren landscape bathed in pale light. Jagged rock formations jutted from the ground, their surfaces glittering like crystal under the moon's twin suns. "This place looks like it hasn't seen life in centuries," Malcolm muttered as he stepped onto the rocky ground. "It's remote," Elena said, scanning the horizon. "That's what we need right now. A place to regroup and figure out our next move." The survivors set up a makeshift camp using the pod's emergency supplies. As night fell, the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting the landscape into shadow. The stars above shone brilliantly, a stark reminder of the vastness of space, and the dangers lurking within it. Elena sat by the faint glow of a portable heater, her mind racing with unanswered questions. The Zorvath's hybridization project, Cawthon's cryptic words, the sudden appearance of Earth's fleet, it all pointed to a larger conflict, one that humanity was only beginning to understand. Malcolm approached, holding 2 ration packs. He handed one to her and sat down. "You've been quiet," he said. "Just thinking," Elena replied, tearing open the pack. "There's so much we don't know. Why the Zorvath were doing this, what they hoped to gain. They were breeding hybrids," Malcolm said bitterly. "Turning us into things?" Elena shook her head. "It's more than that. Cawthon said something about survival, about us being the key to theirs. What does that even mean?" Before Malcolm could respond, a faint hum echoed through the air. The survivors froze, their eyes darting to the sky. A streak of light appeared on the horizon, growing brighter as it approached. "It's a ship," Malcolm said, his voice tight. "Get to cover." Elena barked, grabbing her weapon. The group scrambled behind the rocky outcroppings, their eyes fixed on the approaching vessel. It was sleek and angular, its hull glinting under the starlight. As it descended, its engines emitted a low, resonant tone that set Elena's teeth on edge. The ship landed a short distance away, its ramp extending with a hiss. A figure emerged, silhouetted against the glow of the ship's interior. As it stepped into the moonlight, Elena's breath caught. "Cawthon," she muttered. The Zorvath commander walked toward them, his crystalline form shimmering faintly. He carried no weapons, his hands raised in what appeared to be a gesture of peace. Malcolm was less inclined to trust. "He's got some nerve showing up here," he growled, raising his blaster. "Wait," Elena said, stepping forward. "You're seriously going to let him talk?" Malcolm demanded. Elena didn't answer. Her gaze remained fixed on Cawthon as he stopped a few meters away. "I come alone," Cawthon said, his voice resonating in their minds. "I have no quarrel with you." "No quarrel?" Malcolm snapped. "You tortured us. Used us." Cawthon's gaze flickered to Malcolm, then back to Elena. "What was done to you was not my choice. I followed orders as did my kin. But I now see the error in our ways." Elena folded her arms. "Why are you here, Cawthon?" "To warn you," he said. "The destruction of our vessel will not go unanswered. The Zorvath High Council sees humanity as a threat. They will retaliate." Elena's stomach tightened. "Retaliate how?" Your worlds will burn, Cawthon said simply. Unless you act. The campfire crackled softly as the group gathered around, their eyes fixed on Cawthon. He explained the Zorvatha's motives with a calm detachment that sent shivers down Elena's spine. Our species is ancient, he began. We have survived countless cycles of extinction and renewal. But our biology is failing. The hybridization project was an attempt to integrate your species' resilience into ours. Resilience? Malcolm scoffed. You mean you wanted to steal what makes us human? Cawthon didn't deny it. Your kind possesses an adaptability we lack. You thrive in adversity where others would perish. The Council believed that merging our strengths would ensure our survival. But you didn't think to ask, Elena said coldly. Cawthon's gaze lowered. The Council saw no need. They deemed your species primitive, incapable of understanding the scope of our plight. Elena felt a surge of anger but forced herself to focus. You said there's going to be retaliation. How long do we have? Not long, Cawthon said. The Council will deploy a fleet. Their weapons are unlike anything you have faced. Malcolm leaned forward, his expression skeptical. And why are you telling us this? What do you get out of it? Cawthon hesitated. I wish to make amends. I believe there is another way, one that does not involve annihilation. Elena studied him carefully. She didn't trust him, not entirely, but she couldn't ignore the urgency in his tone. What do you propose? She asked. The Council operates from a central hub, Cawthon said. A fortress hidden in the Veil Nebula. If you can reach it, you may be able to broker peace, or at least delay their attack. Reach it? Malcolm said incredulously. We're stranded on a rock with no resources, no allies and no way off this moon. Cawthon straightened, his form shimmering with faint light. I can take you there. But it will not be easy. The journey is fraught with danger, and the Council will not listen willingly. Elena exchanged a glance with Malcolm. She could see the doubt in his eyes, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. But she also saw the flicker of hope, the same hope that kept her moving forward. We don't have a choice, she said finally. If there's a chance to stop this, we have to try. Cawthon nodded. Then we must leave now. Time is not on our side. As the group prepared to board Cawthon's ship, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into a trap. But if there was even a slim chance to save humanity, she was willing to take the risk. The galaxy was watching, and their actions would determine its fate. The sleek Zorvath ship cut through the darkness of space with terrifying precision. Its hull gleamed under the distant stars as it accelerated toward the Veil Nebula, a region of space so dangerous that it was often avoided by even the most advanced civilizations. A swirling mass of dust and gravitational anomalies, the nebula was a natural barrier that concealed the fortress of the Zorvath High Council, a place so secretive that it was whispered to be impervious to conventional weapons. Inside the ship, Elena sat in a small briefing room, her eyes scanning the holographic map that Cawthon had projected. The diagram of the nebula was filled with complex, shifting patterns. Pulses of light rippled across the map as she zoomed in on the center, where the High Council's fortress was located. I'm not going to lie, Malcolm said from his seat across from her. This is insane. We're flying into the heart of enemy territory, with no backup and no idea what to expect. Elena didn't look up from the display. I know. But we don't have much of a choice. I'm not so sure about this, Malcolm muttered, his voice thick with skepticism. Cawthon says he wants to help, but I still don't trust him. He's a Zorvath. They don't change. I don't trust him either, Elena admitted, her fingers tapping restlessly on the table. But his offer is the only shot we've got. Cawthon's voice interrupted their conversation, coming through the comms. We are approaching the nebula. Prepare yourselves. The journey will be perilous. Elena stood, glancing at Malcolm before moving to the cockpit. The bridge was silent, save for the hum of the ship's engines. Cawthon stood at the helm, his translucent skin gleaming in the low light as he manipulated the controls with a fluid grace that spoke to his species' natural affinity for technology. We are close, Cawthon said, his voice eerily calm. The nebula will disorient you. Stay focused. Do not allow the gravitational anomalies to affect your navigation. If we are to succeed, we must remain sharp. Elena nodded. Understood. Malcolm entered the cockpit a moment later, his gaze fixed on the view ahead. The nebula loomed large now, a swirling mass of light and shadow that seemed to pulse with life. Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. Even from a distance, the Veil Nebula felt unnatural. We're not even inside yet, and it feels like the ship's already fighting to keep us out, Malcolm said, his voice tense. It's the gravity wells, Cawthon explained. The nebula distorts space-time, creating pockets where reality warps. The further in we go, the more unstable it becomes. Stay calm. It is a delicate process. As the ship entered the nebula, the stars outside seemed to stretch and warp. The ship's systems began to hum louder, the lights flickering momentarily before stabilizing. The sensation was like traveling through a thick fog, the once clear view of the cosmos becoming a shifting sea of stars and distortion. Elena's stomach lurched as the gravitational pulls of the nebula tugged at the ship, making it veer slightly to the left. Cawthon, can you keep us on course? Elena asked, her voice sharp. Cawthon didn't respond immediately, his attention fully focused on the controls. His expression was one of intense concentration, the pale light from the nebula casting strange shadows across his face. After a moment he spoke again. It is not the nebula that concerns me, he said, his voice low. It is what lies within it. The ship plunged deeper into the nebula, the light from the stars now reduced to a faint glow. Elena gripped the edge of her seat as the ship's movements grew more erratic. She could feel the pull of the gravitational forces, threatening to tear the vessel apart if they weren't careful. I thought we were prepared for this, Malcolm shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. This is insane. We are, Cawthon replied, his voice calm but tinged with something else. But the veil is not the true danger. Suddenly, a sharp alarm blared across the cockpit, and the ship lurched violently. Elena barely managed to stay in her seat as the controls flashed with red warnings. What the hell was that? Malcolm yelled, grabbing onto the nearest console for support. A disturbance, Cawthon said, his voice tight. He twisted the controls, trying to stabilize the ship, but it was no use. We are not alone. Before Elena could respond, a massive shape appeared out of the nebula, a silhouette emerging from the swirling clouds of dust. The shape was enormous, far too large to be any ship she had ever seen. It was as though the nebula itself had birthed this monstrous entity. Elena's heart raced. What is that thing? A guardian, Cawthon said, his voice filled with grim realization. It is the protector of the veil. A construct built to prevent unauthorized entry into the High Council's domain. The guardian was closing in fast, its form gradually becoming clearer. It was a vast structure, its surface resembling a network of crystalline tendrils that glowed faintly, resonating with the nebula's energy. It moved with purpose as though it had been waiting for them. Malcolm's voice was strained. How do we fight that thing? It's not just a ship, it's something else. We do not fight it, Cawthon said coldly. We must outrun it. It will not destroy us unless we attempt to breach the fortress. But it will force us to turn back if we cannot evade it. The Guardian's massive tendrils extended, twisting through the nebula with terrifying speed. Elena's eyes flicked to the sensor panel, where a swarm of smaller vessels, perhaps drones, perhaps something more, began to converge on their position. The vast construct was not alone. We need to get out of here now, Elena said, her pulse quickening. Cawthon, can your ship outrun them? For a time, he replied, his voice calm. But we must navigate carefully. The gravitational forces of the nebula are unpredictable. I can maneuver, but it will require precision. Do it, Elena ordered, gripping the armrest as the ship lurched again. The hum of the engines shifted, and the ship shot forward, weaving through the nebula with alarming agility. The Guardian followed relentlessly, its massive form looming larger as it drew closer. The ship's shaking intensified, and Elena could feel the pressure building in her chest as they plunged deeper into the heart of the nebula. We're not going to make it, Malcolm shouted, his face pale as he looked out at the twisting mass of energy and debris that surrounded them. We will, Cawthon replied, his voice filled with steely determination. Trust me. The next few minutes were a blur of sharp turns and twisting, ever-narrowing paths. Elena's hands were white-knuckled on the seat as she watched the Guardian's massive tendrils stretch toward them, each movement calculated to trap them in the nebula's core. The ship shook violently as Cawthon executed a series of evasive maneuvers, pushing the vessel to its limits. Elena could hear the screech of metal as the hull groaned under the strain, but the ship held together. We're almost there, Cawthon called out, his voice tense. Prepare for sudden acceleration. Before Elena could react, the ship shot forward like a bullet, racing through a narrow passage between two massive gravitational anomalies. The Guardian was right behind them, its tendrils snapping at the ship's tail, but the ship barely managed to avoid a direct hit. Elena's breath came in ragged gasps as they burst through the final barrier, the nebula's light flickering behind them. In the distance they could see the silhouette of the fortress, a massive structure that seemed to float in the heart of the nebula, surrounded by the glowing energy of the void. "We're here," Cawthon said softly. "Now we face the council." The ship slowed and Elena took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. The true test of their survival had just begun. The fortress loomed ahead, rising from the heart of the Veil Nebula like a monstrous titan. Its jagged spires pierced the swirling mists of the nebula, glowing faintly with an eerie, pulsating energy that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of space itself. The ship drifted closer, the gravitational pull of the fortress tugging at them like a silent but powerful hand. Elena stood at the viewport, her gaze fixed on the imposing structure. There was no doubt in her mind that they were entering the most dangerous place they had ever been. "Brace yourselves," Cawthon's voice echoed through the ship's comm system. "We are entering a space of immense power. The council will be watching. And they will not be pleased." Malcolm paced behind her, his face a mask of tension. "Do you honestly think we can talk our way out of this?" he asked, his voice low. "They want humanity gone, Elena. You saw the way they spoke about us. We're nothing more than an experiment to them." "I know," she replied, her voice steady. "But if there's a chance to stop this madness, we have to take it." Cawthon's ship glided toward the massive entrance of the fortress. The air felt thick, charged with an unnatural energy. Elena could almost hear the hum of the immense power that flowed through the structure. Power that could obliterate them in an instant if the council chose. As they drew closer, the ship was surrounded by a swarm of small, sleek vessels, Zorvath drones that flitted around them like predatory birds. Their movements were swift, coordinated, almost unnervingly precise. "They're keeping their distance," Malcolm said, peering out the viewport. "But I don't like how they're circling us. It feels like a trap." "It's a warning," Cawthon said from the cockpit. "The council is watching. They want to see how you respond. If you make a single wrong move, they will take it as an act of aggression." The ship continued its descent, its landing gear preparing for contact with the fortress. As they drew nearer to the ground, the drones withdrew, retreating into the structure's towering spires. "This is it," Elena whispered, her heart racing. The ship touched down with a soft, almost imperceptible thud. The moment the engines powered down, the air inside the ship seemed to grow heavier. There was no turning back now. "Stay close," Cawthon warned, his voice quiet but urgent. "We will be escorted. Do not make any sudden movements." The hatch of the ship opened with a hiss, revealing the darkened landscape of the fortress landing pad. The ground was made of blackened stone, slick and polished, as if it had been carved from the deepest voids of space itself. The air was cold and sterile, carrying with it the weight of ages. A group of Zorvath soldiers stood waiting, their forms cloaked in shimmering metallic armor. They did not move as Elena and the others disembarked, their eyes hidden behind reflective visors. The atmosphere was tense, charged with the silent promise of danger. Elena led the group forward, her heart pounding in her chest. Cawthon stayed close by her side, though his gaze remained fixed ahead, wary of the soldiers. The air was thick with silence, and the weight of the moment hung over them like a heavy fog. The soldiers did not speak as they formed a perimeter around the group, their weapons ready, but not pointed directly at them. They merely moved in perfect synchronization, guiding the humans and their Zorvath ally toward the heart of the fortress. As they moved deeper into the complex, Elena couldn't help but feel the eyes of the council upon them. The air seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy, a presence that seemed to stretch out beyond the confines of the fortress itself. She could sense the power in the walls, in the architecture, and in the very atmosphere. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings and holographic displays, showcasing scenes of Zorvath history, wars fought and won, technologies developed, civilizations risen and fallen. But there were also symbols that were unfamiliar to Elena, symbols she couldn't quite interpret. Her instincts told her they were not just decorative, they were a language of power, of control. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at the central chamber. The doors slid open silently, revealing a vast, circular space with a high vaulted ceiling. At the center of the room stood a raised dais, and seated upon it were figures cloaked in shadow. The High Council. Elena's breath caught in her throat. There were 6 of them, their forms towering and imposing. Each was different, their bodies shaped by strange alien geometries. Some had humanoid features, but others were more abstract, their limbs elongated, their skin translucent and glowing faintly with internal energy. Their eyes glowed a deep, unsettling red, their gaze fixed on the humans below. Cawthon stepped forward, kneeling before the dais. Elena hesitated for a moment before following suit, her movements cautious. The others did the same, forming a tight circle around Cawthon, who remained kneeling in silence. "You bring humans to our sacred space," one of the council members said, its voice a low, resonating hum that vibrated through Elena's bones. The being's form was tall and thin, its body rippling with a crystalline sheen. Its eyes glowed like embers, filled with a cold, calculating intensity. "We come in peace," Elena said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her chest. "We seek to understand the truth. Why have you experimented on humanity? Why have you tried to destroy us?" The figure's eyes narrowed. "You misunderstand. Humanity is not the enemy. You are the key." Elena blinked in confusion. "The key to what?" "To survival," another council member said, its voice a series of melodic tones. It was smaller, its body adorned with symbols that glowed with a soft, pulsating light. "The Zorvath are dying human. Our race faces extinction. The project was not a choice, it was a desperate attempt to ensure the continuation of our species. Your biology holds the answer we need." Elena's mind raced as she processed the information. "You've been trying to merge your species with ours, to save yourselves?" "Yes," the council member replied, its voice now tinged with frustration. "Our genetic makeup is decaying. We cannot reproduce without intervention. You are the answer, human. You and your resilience. You have the strength to survive in the most hostile environments. You could be the saviors of our race." Malcolm stepped forward, his voice harsh. "So, you're just going to take what you want from us? You didn't care about our lives or our consent. You just used us." The council was silent for a moment, the weight of Malcolm's words hanging in the air. Then the figure on the far side of the dais spoke again. "Perhaps we were wrong," it said, its voice low and almost regretful. "But there is no time left for apologies. The Zorvath will not survive if we do not act. If you will not help us, we will have no choice but to continue our efforts in the only way we know." Elena stood her ground, her voice firm. "We're not your tools. We're not going to let you sacrifice us for your survival." The room grew still, and for a moment the tension was palpable. The council members exchanged glances, their eyes flickering with an unreadable emotion. The next moments would decide everything. "You have made your choice," the first figure said, rising from its seat. "Now we will see if your species has the will to survive as we have. We will give you one final chance to prove yourselves." Elena's heart raced. This was it. The fate of humanity, and of the Zorvath, hung in the balance. The chamber fell into a deep, almost suffocating silence. The Zorvath council members, still seated upon their towering dais, studied Elena and her companions with unsettling intensity. The air hummed with an unnatural energy, and for the first time since they had entered the fortress, Elena could feel the true weight of the stakes bearing down on her. "We will give you a choice," the first figure, tall and crystalline, spoke again, its voice reverberating through the chamber like the echo of an ancient bell. "One final chance to prove your worth." Elena felt her pulse quicken. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with anxiety. "You have come to us, humans, believing you can stop our experimentation and save your kind," the figure said, its voice cold, calculating. "But the truth is, your survival and ours are intertwined. You are not simply a means to an end, you are the key to a greater future. Our survival hinges on you understanding that. And we will test your resolve." Malcolm stepped forward, his eyes burning with anger. "We didn't come here to play your games. We didn't come here to be pawns in some sick experiment." The second figure, a smaller one covered in glowing symbols, rose from its seat and raised a hand, silencing Malcolm. "You misunderstand us, human. You think we have treated you as tools, as experiments. But you are more than that. You are the saviors of both our peoples, or the destroyers." A chill ran down Elena's spine. "What are you asking of us?" she demanded, her voice resolute. "The trial will be simple," the crystalline figure said, its voice imbued with a cold finality. "You will undergo a process to unlock the full potential of your species. You will have access to knowledge that will enable your species to survive in ways you never thought possible. But this power comes at a price. You must make a sacrifice. A choice." Elena's brow furrowed. "What kind of sacrifice?" The council members exchanged glances before the glowing figure answered. "The energy we seek to merge with your species is vast. It has the power to save us, but only if we become one. You will not merely be human after this. The essence of your being will merge with our power, our culture. Your DNA will change, your biology will adapt. You will no longer be purely human, nor will we remain entirely Zorvath. The result will be a new hybrid species, a species that will endure for millennia." Elena's stomach twisted. The idea of such a profound alteration of humanity, of losing what made them human in exchange for survival, was terrifying. But the Zorvith weren't finished yet. If you refuse, the first figure continued, you will ensure the destruction of both our species. Our experiments will continue in secrecy. And your people will be wiped out as we have planned. The knowledge we possess can save us, but not without a cost. The power of your species is both a gift and a curse. The choice is yours. Malcolm snarled, his voice trembling with fury. You can't just decide our fate like this. But Elena placed a hand on his arm, silencing him. She wasn't sure what was worse, accepting this monstrous offer or letting their people die for the sake of maintaining their purity. The idea of blending their species with the Zorvith's cold, calculating nature sickened her. Yet the stakes were so high. Why should we trust you? Elena asked, her voice low, steady. What guarantees do we have that this hybridization won't destroy us entirely? The second figure spoke again, its voice softer, almost apologetic. There are no guarantees. But we are not like the others. We do not seek to conquer, nor to destroy. We are dying human. Our species is on the brink of extinction. Our genetic code is collapsing. The process we offer you will ensure survival for both of us for eternity. There are no other choices left. How can you be sure? Elena's voice cracked slightly, betraying her growing uncertainty. What if you are just trying to use us? We are the last of our kind, the first figure said gravely. There is no more time for doubt. The fate of the Zorvith and humanity rests in your hands. For a long moment, Elena stood in the center of the chamber, her mind racing. She could feel the weight of the council's gaze upon her, each of their eyes glowing with an unsettling intensity. She wanted to fight back, to say no, but the reality of the situation kept pressing down on her. The Zorvith weren't just asking for their cooperation, they were demanding it. But the truth was they had no real choice but to play along. What happens if we refuse? Malcolm asked, his voice tinged with anger. If we walk away from this, will you just destroy us? Not immediately, the crystalline figure replied. But if you reject this chance, you will seal your species' fate. Your people will not survive without the knowledge we can provide. You will be wiped out, slowly but surely, by the forces you cannot control. Cawthon, who had been standing quietly beside Elena, finally spoke up. His voice was calm but filled with emotion. They speak the truth, Elena. We, too, are on the verge of extinction. I have seen it in my people, the decay of our species. We are but echoes of what we once were. We are not asking you to sacrifice everything for us. We ask that you join us to make us whole. Humanity is resilient. You will not lose yourselves completely. You will be stronger than you can imagine. Elena's thoughts spiraled. The hybridization was the key, but at what cost? Was it worth losing the essence of what it meant to be human? She thought of her family, her friends, the world she knew. Would they even recognize humanity after this? Would they still be the same people if they became part Zorvith? I need to think, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The council remained silent, watching her every move. She turned to Cawthon, who gave her a solemn nod. This is not just about saving humanity, Cawthon said quietly. It's about survival. We cannot afford to let our people, yours and mine, be lost to time. The choice is painful, but it is necessary. Elena nodded, still torn. She wanted to fight back, to refuse their offer, but as the seconds ticked by, she realized something. If they did nothing, if they left now, the Zorvith's extinction would not be the only tragedy. Humanity would be wiped from existence. The Zorvith had the power to destroy them, to manipulate them into submission. But there was a chance, a slim one, that if they could blend their species, they could not only save themselves but also usher in a new era of cooperation. Perhaps they could reclaim their humanity in the process, after the storm had passed. She turned back to face the council. We will join you, she said, her voice steady now, though her heart was filled with fear. But we will do so on our terms. We will not become puppets in your game. We will remain human in the truest sense, and we will rebuild our future together as equals. The council members regarded her for a long moment, their glowing eyes unreadable. Then, slowly, the first figure nodded. Very well, it said. Your terms are accepted. Let us begin the process. As the Zorvith advanced, the humming energy in the chamber grew stronger. Elena knew that the road ahead would be uncertain, filled with challenges they could not yet foresee. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt a glimmer of hope. The future was uncertain, but it was still theirs to shape. And together, humans and Zorvith would survive. The chamber felt alive, pulsing with energy as if the very walls of the fortress were watching them, waiting for the final decision. Elena felt a cold shiver run down her spine, but there was no turning back now. The council had spoken and their offer had been accepted. Humanity's fate, along with the Zorvithas, now rested in her hands. The first figure, the tall, crystalline one, raised a hand, signaling for the others to step back. Slowly, the Zorvith council members retreated, their presence still looming over them. The air was thick with tension. Elena's pulse raced, her mind spinning. "Come forward," the crystalline figure commanded. Elena stepped cautiously toward the center of the chamber, her mind swirling with questions. Was this really the right choice? Could humanity survive this, or would they lose themselves in the process? She could feel Malcolm's gaze on her, a mix of skepticism and fear. He was torn too, but he had always trusted her judgment. He knew the stakes, even if the cost was uncertain. Cathuin, who had remained silent through most of the exchange, stood beside her, his posture resolute. The Zorvith were not strangers to sacrifice, they had lived through their own dark times. But he seemed more at peace now, as though he had accepted the inevitability of this moment. "We must understand one thing clearly before we proceed," the glowing figure of the second council member spoke, its voice resonating through the chamber like the hum of a distant star. "This process will not be instantaneous. It will take time. The integration of your species into ours, biologically, culturally, requires careful, deliberate work. It cannot be rushed. You will feel the effects gradually and you will be forever changed. But the power you gain will allow both our races to survive." Elena nodded, trying to steady the chaos within her. She glanced at her companions, Malcolm, Cathuin, and the other humans, who stood in a tight formation behind her. There was no going back now. The choice had been made. "Is there no other way?" Malcolm asked, his voice tight with frustration. He was angry, but there was a quiet fear behind his words, one that Elena couldn't ignore. "You said we had a chance to fight back, to refuse. You promised us a choice. Your refusal would only ensure the demise of both our peoples," the crystalline figure answered. "It is not a matter of promise. It is a matter of survival. We cannot give you a choice in the traditional sense. We offer you the path that leads to salvation. You must accept this if you wish to save your people." Malcolm clenched his fists but said nothing more. Elena could feel his resistance, but she could also sense the flicker of understanding in his eyes. As much as it pained him, he knew they had reached a crossroads. There was no viable alternative. The glowing figure reached out, and the air around them shifted, becoming thick with energy. It wasn't like anything Elena had ever experienced. The air felt heavier, as though the very molecules were charged with power. She could hear a low hum vibrating through her bones, and she could almost feel the pulse of the Zorvitha's energy weaving into the atmosphere around them. "Prepare yourselves," the figure commanded. "We will initiate the merging process now." Elena took a deep breath, holding her ground. This was it. The moment that would forever alter the course of humanity. The thought of what they were about to endure, the physical and emotional toll of the process, was almost too much to bear. The Zorvith had already made it clear that they would not hold back. This was no gentle fusion, no simple exchange of knowledge. It would be a trial. She felt a sharp pang in her chest as the Zorvith began to chant, a low rhythmic sound that resonated in the very core of the chamber. Their voices intertwined, creating an almost hypnotic melody, ancient and haunting. The energy around Elena swirled, as if the entire fortress was reacting to their presence. Her skin tingled and she felt a sudden warmth spread through her body. "Stay focused," Cathuin said softly, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. His words were a reminder, a grounding force. She was not alone in this. The air thickened further as the energy began to coalesce around her, tendrils of light flickering across the chamber like bolts of lightning. She could see it now, an energy web forming around the humans and the Zorvith, binding them together in a complex, intricate pattern. She could feel it on a cellular level, the very fibers of her being tingling with the unfamiliar sensation of merging with something far older and more powerful than humanity. Her vision blurred for a moment as if she were falling into a deep void, but then her senses sharpened. She could hear the whispers of the Zorvith, their voices pressing into her mind, demanding understanding. The energy surged around her and she gasped as it hit her like a wave, sending shocks through her body. The pain was overwhelming at first, hot, searing, and unbearable, but then it shifted, becoming something more manageable though no less intense. It was a profound sensation of being torn apart and remade at once. She could feel her DNA being rewritten, the very structure of her body changing in response to the Zorvith energy. It wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional, spiritual. She could sense the Zorvith consciousness, their thoughts, their struggles, their memories, all flooding into her mind. Their ancient knowledge, their survival instincts, their pain and their triumphs. It was a flood of sensation and information that nearly overwhelmed her, but she clung to her humanity. She would not lose herself. "Stay with us, Elena," Cawthon whispered again, his voice cutting through the chaos of her mind. "You are strong. Do not let them take you. You are human." But in the depths of the merging process she felt something else. It wasn't just the Zorvith consciousness, it was her own. The essence of what made her human, her memories, her desires, her love for her family, for Malcolm, for the world she had known. It was still there, anchoring her in the midst of this alien transformation. She felt an overwhelming surge of love and determination. Her people would survive. And with that thought she began to understand. This was not about becoming Zorvith. This was about merging the best of both species, human resilience and Zorvith knowledge. It was the creation of something new, something greater. She didn't know what the future would hold. She didn't know if she could ever return to the life she had once known. But she knew that humanity's story was far from over. It was just beginning. The hybrid species they would become might be different, but they would carry the legacy of both races. Their strengths, their flaws, their hopes, their dreams. They would build something new. The energy in the room intensified, and Elena could feel herself drawn deeper into the process, until the pain became almost unbearable. But through it all she held on to that glimmer of hope, the belief that they could survive this, and that, in the end, they would emerge stronger than ever before. And as the light around them reached its crescendo, a new dawn began to break, one that would change the fate of both humanity and the Zorvith forever. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.